السلام عليكم ومساء الخير للجميع. يشرفني اليوم أن أقدم باسم المركز الشيخ إبراهيم تحت إشراف معالي الشيخ كوامي السيدة سامية نكروما التي ستعطينا محاضرة على يعني أمر مهم جدا، هو في الحقيقة يتبع مهمة أبوها الله يرحمه فخامة الرئيس كوامي نكروما. أنا جزائري، كنت في الجامعة في سنة 1964، كنت رئيس الاتحاد الطلبة في التاريخ والجغرافية، وجاء الرئيس كوامي نكروما مع الرئيس سيكو توري من غيني ورئيسنا ذاك الوقت أحمد بن بلة الله يرحمهم كلهم. وكانت في ذيك الفترة يعني الستينات الحرية لكل هذه البلدان في شمال إفريقيا، المغرب، تونس، الجزائر، وكذلك في إفريقيا الغربية، ومن ضمنها يعني غانا، جمهورية غانا كانت تحت إشراف الإنجليز. بعدين يعني بعد الاستقلال الرئيس نكروما أب معالي السيدة سامية نكروما هو اللي أطلق هذه الفكرة أنه لازم هذه القارة تتحد، وهذه يعني الخطوات الأولى اللي بدأت مع هذا الرؤساء، معهم كذلك الله يرحمه رئيس بورقيبة من تونس، جمال عبد الناصر من مصر. وعندنا صور تبين هذه الفترة، هذه الستينات كانت يعني فترة كانت ناشطة كثير من الناحية السياسية، وهي اللي أعطت لهذا السيدة الآن هذا الدفعة إلى الأمام. واليوم تتكلم على العلاقة ما بين الرؤية الإفريقية للتوحيد القارات الإفريقية والعلاقات مع المنطقة العربية. So the floor is yours. You can speak either in English or in Arabic or even in Italian, because we can speak Italian both.
Yes, we speak Italian.
تفضلي.
Yeah. تحب أقف؟ Thank you.
تفضلي.
Thank you very much. Do you want me to start?
تحبي تكوني واقفة ولا أحسن؟
Okay, there's a microphone. عايزيكوا تشوفوني كمان، مش بس تسمعوني. Is this good? So good. مساء الخير للجميع. وأنا مسرورة جدا، سعيدة جدا إن أنا أكون في هذا البلد الجميل النظيف. I'm very impressed with بحرين. دي أول مرة أزور الدولة دي، وأول مرة أشوف كل الجمال والاهتمام بالجمال اللي أنا شفته من خلال الأكتيفيتيز ونشاطات المركز. أنا هنا عشان برضو صداقة. أنا قابلت الشيخ كوامي في مصر. We are both members of the Board of Trustees of مكتبة الإسكندرية, the Alexandrina Biblioteca Alexandrina or the Alexandria Library. And we met and we got on immediately. We clicked. زي ما بيقولوا بالإنجليزي. We had a shared vision. لكن until I came here, I never imagined how important the work Sheikh Kوامي and her staff and her entourage and her colleagues and supporters. I never understood the extent of the importance of the work they are doing. And I'm so energized to go back home and at least try and do something for us also to be sensitive about our surrounding, our tradition, our cultural remains, and everything to do with our identity, who we are and what we want to project. So I just want to tell you that I'm very inspired already by this visit, and I've only been here one day. يوم فقط. Okay, so now as you heard from our dear brother from Algeria, I will tell you some stories about Algeria too. But as you heard, I want to speak to you today about Pan-Africanism and also about how Pan-Africanism encouraged its pioneers to seek close ties and relations with what we call the Arab North Africa, the northern part of Africa, which is Arab. And how that closeness also has given many of us who believe in Pan-Africanism the encouragement or the impetus to get closer to the Arab world, because North Africa is Arab and African. And if a big part, a large section of the population of the Arab world is in North Africa, so the Arab people must be our cousins too. There must be a strong connection which we must nurture and encourage. Now, I wanted to start by reading excerpts from the book that I've just finished writing. It's not yet published, but I think I'm going to tell you the story so that I can mix it with some Arabic. Rather than read, I wanted to read it to you, but I'm going to speak. Now, this book is about our dear father, as you heard, the great Pan-Africanist. He was, yes, the first prime minister, first president of Ghana, but he was also the catalyst to independence. There was an independence movement, but when he came from his studies abroad in the US, in England, when he returned, he speeded up the process. He radicalized it, revolutionized it, and he went all over the country just with his little suitcase, walking miles, trying to advocate for independence. So this book is about our father, but not just. It's also about our mother, because I feel not much has been spoken or written about our mother and the role she played in upholding and maintaining the legacy of our dear father. But it's also about the family as a whole, so people understand what happens to the family of some of these great leaders who make very, very important sacrifices. They put even their countries, they put their vision ahead of their family. But this is something I'm proud about, and I appreciate now that I'm much older, and now that after entering active politics myself, as I used to be an MP, a leader of a political party, and I hope, God willing, inshallah, to go back to Parliament to push for more humane policies and for African unity. Now, the story I was going to read to you is from maybe the 4th, 5th chapter, and do you know what the title is? The title is Pan-African Romance. As we were saying with our friends outside, the union between our father and mother was a love story, but not just. It's a story about politics and romance. Their marriage was by all accounts a political Pan-African marriage. And you will see why as I start the story. I want to take you back to 1957, long time ago. Ghana gained independence in March 1957. وأول ما الوالد بقى Prime Minister كان في ضغط جامد. A lot of says he has to get married. How can he not be married? And you know, we like to say in Ghana that we are the first country south of the Sahara Desert to gain independence. But we are not the first in the whole of the continent because, of course, the Arab North Africa, most of it was independent by 1957. But anyway, under pressure, our father decided he has to get married. But because of his vision for one Africa, from north to south, from east to west, he decided, he must have thought hard about it, that he has to marry a woman from the Arab North. And he was friends with the King of Morocco, with the leader of Tunisia, Bourguiba, with many countries. But he was also good friends with who? With Gamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt. In fact, these two men saw eye to eye on many issues. And Egypt, of course, came to his mind because a year earlier, the Suez Canal War had happened and Egypt was all over the place. Anyway, so our father decided to ask a group of his colleagues, Muslim colleagues, by the way, who studied in Al-Azhar in Cairo, to go and look for a suitable Egyptian wife. And they went round family, from family to family. They were looking amongst the Coptic minority. And everywhere they go, they meet with rejections. But who are these people? مين الناس دول؟ هم بياكلوا ايه؟ هم بيلبسوا ايه؟ بيتكلموا انهي لغة؟ ايه عاداتهم وتقاليدهم؟ No. مش عايزين نودي بنتنا. بناتنا ما تروحش البلاد دي. We don't know these countries. There was very little familiarity between the North and what we call Black Africa. Until they stumbled across our mother's family. Now, our mother was a very beautiful woman, tall, very good figure, very elegant, very striking. She had this long, beautiful black hair. But one thing about mother, she was a revolutionary in her own way because she loved to read about politicians, leaders, revolutions. So when she was giving press cuttings about this man, Kwame Nkrumah from Ghana, she quickly thought, okay, I want to meet this man. I want to meet him. I also want to meet the leader of Egypt at the time, President Gamal Abdel Nasser. So the Ghanaian colleagues of Nkrumah thought, that's it. This is our chance. We are never going to find another girl who would want and who's interested in Black Africa. So they tried first with the family. The family was terrified. No, we cannot send our daughter. But this time there was a difference. Since the girl was willing, they thought they are going to approach Kwame Nkrumah's friend and the leader of Egypt at the time. So they went to him, President Gamal Abdel Nasser. He invited the family and he told them, listen, we are talking about one of the greatest leaders of independence, of African decolonization and unity. We cannot say no to this man. At the very least, we'll organize a very low-profile visit. Your daughter, with one of the elders of the families, goes to Ghana, quiet visit, nobody will know. She meets the leader of Ghana, and she comes back. So at least we would have done our duty. We cannot say no, but to reassure the family, Egypt is going to open a full-fledged embassy, full diplomatic relations with Ghana. And this is how an embassy of Egypt was opened in Ghana. The delegation traveled last day of 1957. Our father is waiting for mother at the airport with his entourage. Mother steps out of the plane and their eyes meet. Mother always said, instantly, she could feel Kwame Nkrumah's charm and charisma, and she thought he was the most attractive man she had ever met. They go together, exchange pleasantries, because don't forget, the young woman, Fathia Halim Riz, traveled with the whole diplomatic delegation to open that embassy we spoke about. So our father and mother, after the pleasantries, they decide they have to sit together to try and understand each other. But there was one big problem. They did not speak a common language. So they started with interpreters. Mother spoke Arabic and French. She went to, Arabic French schools. Our father spoke English and Nzima, his ethnic group's language, and Fanti, another language. At that time, he didn't speak French. And of course, he didn't speak Arabic. So they started with interpreters and moved on to what? To dictionaries. And these two people sat together for about 2 hours communicating. And at the end of those 2 hours, they decided to get married without them speaking a common language. They got married, very simple wedding ceremony with our father's colleagues and the few delegation, the delegates who came, and that was it. Mother never left. She didn't leave Ghana until 8 years later, unfortunately, when the government of our father was toppled through a coup d'etat. Now, for me, this story, it's a personal one, but it's symbolic. Rams. It's symbolic of what the concept of unity is. No language barrier, no ethnic barrier. People do not have to speak a common language. People do not have to be of the same religion. People do not have to be from the same ethnic group. People do not have to be even of the same country to have a shared vision. What they need to have is a common aspiration, common values. And I tell you, that marriage, I think, must have done symbolically, must have done something so big for the relations, not only between Egypt and Ghana, but between Egypt and the whole of Black Africa, between the whole of North Africa and the rest of the continent. Now, as soon as Ghana became independent, our father started practicing Pan-Africanism, which I think بالعربي بنقول الوحدة الإفريقية, but it goes beyond القارة. Pan-Africanism is solidarity with Africans everywhere. You know, those born outside the continent and those inside also. So we are talking about African Americans, we are talking about Black or African Brazilians, we are talking about a whole group of people who are today, maybe we can say 1.5 billion people, the continent and those outside. And of course, we are talking about Arab North Africa, and by association, we must include our cousins from the Arab world. Now, I was saying that our father started practicing Pan-Africanism, and I want to tell you a bit about Pan-Africanism. As our father defined it, because Pan-Africanism could be a movement, حركة, could be a concept, مش عارفة, an idea, فكرة, it could be an objective, a project, مشروع. Now, our father defined it in one of his books as the total liberation and unification of Africans. تحرير, liberation, والوحدة. So they went hand in hand, liberation and unity. And indeed, that is what happened in those years. All the countries in Africa united to decolonize and then later to beat or overcome apartheid in southern Africa. So unity was key. So I was saying, our father started practicing as the leader of Ghana Pan-Africanism. So this year after independence, as he settled into his married life, he invites the free African countries, and there were not many, because there were about 8, and most of them were North African countries and Ethiopia. They came to Ghana for the All African People's Conference. After that, leaders of nationalist liberation movements all came to Ghana. Also, a few months later, people like Patrice Lumumba, Jomo Kenyatta, so many others, and Frantz Fanon, representing Algeria. At that conference, Father heard Fanon and took a great liking to him. And together they sat, and at that conference, it was decided that countries who were free must help countries which are still under colonial rule. And one of the greatest countries that were the focus was what? The great country of Algeria. So Ghana recognized the FLN, the government, provisional government of Algeria before the end of independence war. And in fact, Frantz Fanon was given an office, an embassy, to coordinate support and the campaign for Algeria to be free. And when Algeria won the War of Independence, albeit with 1.5 million martyrs who sacrificed their lives for it, but when they won independence, Algeria became one of the most prominent supporters, financially, materially, and politically, of liberation movements in Africa, particularly in Southern Africa, countries which had not yet gained independence. So I'm only telling you these stories to give you an idea of how close our countries were, how diligent, how serious we were about uniting to defeat colonialism. And several years later today, I'm happy to see that in some ways, that same unity on some positions that are very key to the peace of humanity is also centered around unity. And I want to give you another example. More recently, the country that has filed a suit against Israel, taking it to the International Court of Justice, is which country? An Arab country? No, it's the Republic of South Africa. South Africa was helped by North Africa to a large extent. There were training camps in Egypt. There were training camps in Algeria. There was a lot of diplomatic work, diplomatic efforts, financial efforts. Ghana was given passports to South Africans, fighters, so that they can leave and coordinate a campaign for their support. Many of them hold Ghanaian passports till today. So I was saying, more recently, it is South Africa that has taken the initiative to file a suit against Israel. And I'm happy that I was part of the demonstration, the protest march in our country in Ghana, when I was told by the Palestinian embassy, and by the way, all countries, almost, there are few exceptions, and there are reasons for that, but almost all African countries today have recognized the state of Palestine and have embassies representing the Palestinian people. So in Ghana too, we have the Palestinian embassy, and we together under the auspices, together with a movement we are all part of, the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, we went on a march, peaceful march, to bring attention to what is happening in Palestine. The destruction of lives, innocent lives, men, women, and children, and the destruction of land and properties. And it is not a coincidence that it is an African country which has suffered a very similar fate as that of the Palestinians, that has taken this initiative despite economic pressures and threats of punishment for that radical and revolutionary stand. Now, over the years, after independence, many important things happened through Pan-Africanism. One of them is, as my brother just said, the establishment or the creation or founding of the Organization of African Unity, which is today the African Union. Now, I will give you a little idea of the original concept of unity, because it is important for our discussion today. Now, the original concept put forward was by Ghana did not only talk about economic unity. That was there. In fact, Ghana under Nkrumah presented a very ambitious economic unity program. Common currency, common central bank of issue, common markets, common monetary zone, continental economic planning, because the optimum zone of development for the continent was the whole continent. For us to develop, we must build our industries and infrastructure together, because as many of you know, many of our countries today, because we went separately, we are struggling under debts. We are servicing our debts at the expense of development. But if we had united, if we do it now, it will be easier to build all the huge infrastructural projects that we desperately need for energy, for housing, and for many of the basic needs. So I was saying, the original concept of unity was not just economic integration, but it was what also? It was having a common foreign policy and diplomacy. If we are all going to be for Palestine and the right of Palestinians to have a state, then we all have that position in Africa. 54, 55 African countries. The second thing is, in addition to economic integration, common foreign policy and defense and diplomacy, the third requirement or objective was what? To have common defense strategy. One Pan-African army, one high command. It is so important to build the army from the continent. Today there are so many struggles, so many points of conflict. Let's look at what's happening in Sudan, the power struggle, and where we are. That became a civil war. Let's think of Somalia, which since the 80s has been going through a conflict. There are many, DRC Congo. There are many points of conflicts, and all the foreign armies that have tried to come and somehow diffuse the situation have not been successful. Look at the Sahel region. Look at what happened after the destruction of Libya. Look at how it spilled over into countries of the Sahel, Niger, Mali, which still have not been able to overcome their security problems. So the security challenge alone makes us recall the advice of our leaders in the 60s that Africa has to have that common high military command so that we address every conflict from the continent. And it is so important for the Arab world to understand this, because many of our conflicts could easily spill over. After all, we are neighbors. We are only separated by a narrow sea, the Red Sea. So it is important that we take an interest in building a strong Pan-African command in our continent. So what I'm saying is the concept of unity, African unity, was not simply economic integration. And this is how I want us to look at Arab-African cooperation. You know, project development and financial expertise can tell us all what we need to know about what Africa needs by way of investments. They will tell us you can invest in agriculture, in agri-industries. It is true, we have a deficit. We don't have a big manufacturing base. We have a lot of arable land that is still not being cultivated. So we agree, it is true. We need investments in agriculture. We need investments in renewable energy. No doubt about it, because there is a big deficit. You know what our father used to say about the Great Sahara Desert? He said, the desert, that great desert, must rather unite us, not divide us. But in addition to that, that great desert must also be a project for us to turn it from a desert to make it bloom with green, verdant vegetation. We can turn it to make it a point, a great reference point for renewable solar energy. So that huge desert can work in our favor. It is not a hindrance or a liability. On the contrary, it is one of our strong points, and we should see it as that. Now, I was saying that the concept of unity must not always be centered around economic integration. And we were talking about all the investment opportunities in Africa. I didn't want to come and tell you, oh, the Gulf countries, the Arab world can invest, because in Africa, I'm saying there are countless opportunities, and you just have to look through any of the big financial and development projects, companies, and they will give you all the statistics, all the figures. And thankfully, alhamdulillah, that in the recent years, the Arab countries, the Gulf region, the GCC in particular, are investing more and more in Africa, in agriculture, and, as we talked about, in renewable energy. So we understand that, we know that. But you know, the concept of unity goes beyond economic integration. There has to be more familiarity with the people, with the culture, with the political development and history of a people to appreciate each other fully. And this is why I am particularly passionate about our history, the history of unity between Arab North Africa and the rest of the continent. Because what gave it impetus, what fueled it, what made it stronger, what made it unbreakable was not the economic benefits, but it was the quest for decolonization. It was the quest for justice. It was the quest for a more humane world. So for us to integrate economically properly, let us revisit the original concept of unity. Let us think of, we say, political unity. We don't mean we all have to be one country. We cannot, you know. We have our different ways of doing things. But we must find a common political basis on the very important things that can help us meet the basic needs of our citizens, on the priorities for our development. We need to find a common political basis, because without that common political basis, it's very difficult to move our economies forward for greater integration. If you take Africa today, after many years of talking about economic unity, today, most countries have ratified the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. Have you heard about it? No? I can't say it in Arabic, I'm trying, but basically it's about free trade in the continent. And that is something of interest to the whole world, because sooner or later, Africa will become one big market, so that when one wants to invest, one thinks of a region. You know, many countries, not just one small country with a small area, geographical area, or with a small GDP. But as our market becomes unified, then we are going to make better use of good investment. But we need investment and partnership with mutual respect, with shared values for freedom, for dignity. We need that understanding. You know, some of my Pan-African colleagues, sometimes we get into arguments about one or two issues, and I want to share with you one of them as I conclude. One of the biggest problems we Pan-Africanists have is because there's a section, thank God, a small section of Pan-Africanists who are saying the Arab North cannot be part of the African Unity Project. Why? Because they were engaged in slavery. They've enslaved Africans. Now, we have had this debate many times before, and our position has always been that it's a philosophical position, by the way, but our position has been that, you know, the continent of Africa, as we speak today, it has many influences. The Arab Islamic, the Euro-Christian, in addition to our traditional African. And because we've undergone all these experiences, some of them have been positive, like the shared cultural closeness or influences of the Arab invasions. Some of them have been negative. However, as things stand now, we cannot deny our new identity, that it is fashioned by all these experiences. We cannot cut us into pieces. This is our shared history. This is our experience. And the fact that the Arab North Africa has been so instrumental in the decolonization process has meant that we've all turned a leaf over. And I wouldn't advocate, like our father, I wouldn't advocate a separation between the North and the rest of the continent. And on that note, I want to tell you a very interesting experience I had in Sirte in Libya over 10 years ago, when I heard in one of the summits, I heard Arab African summits, I heard the leader, the then leader, Muammar al-Gaddafi, saying that, and on behalf of my brothers and sisters, that's Gaddafi speaking, I want to apologize for our role in the slave trade in North Africa. And this declaration, or this apology, if you like, was done in front of so many traditional African leaders, many of whom I traveled from Ghana, our country, with them. And I'm only mentioning this story because I want us to be aware of the sentiments in the African streets. Another point of contention, which is evolving recently, is that we hear that many domestic workers from Africa are not always being treated well in the Arab North, in the Gulf countries. Now we need to not shy away, not be discouraged about discussing these issues, because politically speaking, I think it's a disaster for us to be quarreling over these issues. And no matter how hard our governments work together, our people have to understand each other and build a friendship from the ground. So I'm only throwing these things up for us to be aware of them and to see how we can work together to make sure that we resolve them. For me personally and politically, I don't think Africa will survive in dignity without unity. I also don't think that it is in our interest in the global South, and that includes the Arab world and the Gulf region, for us not to become closer and work closer together. We need peace. We need to contribute to peace in our regions, and we can do it better together, building our armies, building our intelligence, building our education, building our industries, and building our political thought together. And I want to end by a very short story. I was in Ethiopia over 10 years ago. They unveiled a statue of Kwame Nkrumah because he was one of the most energetic proponents of الوحدة الإفريقية, African unity. And I remember I was with our then president, 2012, and suddenly, as we are all standing about to cut the ribbon, he said, "Oh, you cut the ribbon." So of course I couldn't say no. As I cut the ribbon, my eyes fell on the inscription at the bottom: Ethiopia shall raise her hands to heaven. That's something our father said. Ethiopia is the land of black people. We say that's the name, not the country. Ethiopia shall raise her hands to heaven. Africa must unite. So in this wonderful holy month of Ramadan, may unity be our guiding light. May we work hard towards unity. May we include it in our guidance, in our spiritual nourishment. Africa must unite. North Africa must unite with Africans and our cousins, our brothers and sisters across the sea, our Arab brothers and sisters, including the Gulf region, must unite with Africa for progress, for development, and for peace. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Excellency, for this very, very important presentation where you have made a very passionate plea about the unity of Africa and unity with the Arab world, based on your own personal experience, your own family experience, and then on the basis of what you are doing now in Africa, but particularly in your country, where you are the president of the party, the People's Party, CPP, that is, you know, the basis of your political action. Thank you so much for this very rich presentation. I would like just to add that one element which could be important in the vision that you have developed and you have also mentioned is the history and culture. And here in Bahrain, under the leadership of Sheikh Hamay, when she created the Arab Regional Center for World Heritage, one of the first talk that we established was the African World Heritage Fund in Johannesburg. And we are going to organize next month a joint meeting between Africans and Arabs about World Heritage. So this is one good example showing that there is no division between the peoples of the North and the people of the South, and there is no division between the Arab countries and the African black countries. I know the problem because when I was in UNESCO, we had a big program called Priority Africa, and we had a lot of discussions about, as you mentioned very clearly, the negative aspects and the positive aspects. I think we have to build history on both aspects and to go further, as you mentioned in your very bright conclusion. Now, I think we give the floor to the audience. يعني بعد هذه المحاضرة القيمة من طرف السيدة سامية نكروما على حياتها الشخصية اللي هي في الحقيقة هي تجسد هذه الفكرة نتاع الوحدة ما بين المنطقة العربية والمنطقة الإفريقية، لأن حياتها الشخصية، حياة عائلتها، ويعني كيف يعني تتكونت هي فكريا وسياسيا، تعطي الآن مثل على هذه الرؤية اللي أبوها أعطاها في الستينات لكل القارة الإفريقية. So now I think هي تتكلم عربي وتتكلم فرنسي وإيطالي، أي لغة. إذا عندكم أي أسئلة ممكن يعني. Anyone wants to speak? تفضل.
مرحبا، مساء الخير الجميع. أنا اسمي عبد الله. I'm an Afro-Arab poet and photographer, and I actually recently had
قرب الميكروفون من فضلك. شكرا.
ينسمع الحين؟ اوكي. اوكي، اسمي عبد الله. أنا Afro-Arab poet and photographer, and I recently actually had one of my poems published, and it's about my experience with racial, let's say, abuse and like that in Bahrain. And I don't want to say that this is a very big issue in Bahrain, but I think similar to what Samiya said, that if we want to have the unity between Arabs and Africans, we need to look back at the past about all the things that led to having these problems in our societies. And I think we can only have true liberation and decolonization if we decolonize our societies and our minds and root out all these ideas, bad ideas in our society, in order for us to move forward. And of course, I've been trying to study all these topics a lot, and I've been trying to educate my peers about all the history and the connection that we have with Africa, because this is not something we should shy away from. This is something we should embrace. And I think my question is that as a young person who's trying to, I don't want to say that I'm trying to be a leader in this where I am at life, but I'm trying to share what I know about from the position where I am. I'm trying to share and educate others around me to be to have this more clear view on where we should go as mixed cultures. So I guess my question is that, like, advice or what do you have to say to young Arabs and generations on how they can move forward, given your wisdom and your knowledge? Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question? And then we can ask Mrs. Or will you reply to this particular question?
Like.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Ashkurak, thank you for the question and the comments. And indeed, I am pretty sure also in this country and in many countries where we call ourselves the global south, including Africa, the young population is growing very fast. So in the continent of Africa, if you look at the statistics, the average African is what? Is a young person. I believe the latest a few years ago was the average age was late 20s, or from mid 20s to late 20s of Africans. So what is this telling us? That most people, the majority, are young in our countries. And in Ghana, we have a proverb, an ancient proverb. It is also one of our symbols. If you ever see, it's a bird turning with her beak. It's called Sankofa. I'm not a good artist, but if you can imagine a bird looking back, it's called Sankofa, which means what? It means there is no shame in looking back, going back to go and pick something up so that you can move forward. And that, in essence, is saying that I believe one of the things that make you very powerful is to be endowed with an ideology. Doesn't have to be a political ideology, but a set of principles, of values, something you believe in passionately, something that resonates with you, you believe in it, and it guides you in everything you do. So I always tell young people that I personally, if I look at myself, 3 things have helped me. One, that I've embraced an ideology that I think is something I can work for, make a contribution. African freedom and unity. Number 2, that I've studied. I've made sure that I study. I have knowledge in my power. And number 3 is spirituality. It can be any religion. It can be your religion or something else. But it is so important for us, as I say as Africans, but I think as everyone, that we are spiritual beings deep inside, and we need to fortify ourselves with that. So that's what I would say to you and any young person. Yeah, spirituality and ideology and education. That's for sure.
Excellent, thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for the informative lecture. You brought up the Global South. The past 6 months had showed us that this planet is being split, North versus South, and the Global South is basically starting to unify against towards one reason, and that's the freedom for the Palestinian. How, in your opinion, having faced the difficulties of Pan-Africanism, how are we looking at Pan-Global South? Because I see a lot of Latin American states moving towards that, and it's moving, but in your opinion, how do you think that is going on right now? Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Yes, it's true. And in fact, I look back, those of us who are a bit older, we look back to the years of, have you heard of non-alignment, especially young people, حركة عدم الانحياز in the 50s and 60s? So that movement developed because developing countries, some of which today are very big, like India, developing countries realized that they need to speak with one voice if they are going to get, some justice in the global system. So here we are, half a century later, and we are still on this matter, because even though non-alignment is not active today, but I think the world needs it, because today the Global South undoubtedly has the biggest population, but this is where the greatest things have to happen for our people. And in my humble opinion, the same advice we are giving ourselves for unity stands also for the Global South. We must find common ground, common political basis on the issues that affect us and the world peace in general. We must be able to discuss them, debate them until we find that common ground, because non-alignment, development and peace and security of the Global South, the unity of the Global South will make sure that the world is a more humane, a more peaceful, and a more stable place. I have no doubt about it. As long as the Global South remains not in disarray, not united, I think there is more security challenges in the world. So I think it's one of the most important things, and it's a pillar of unity, one of the pillars of unity. Pan-Africanism also means cultivating that common ground, common position with the Global South. And that is why in those years when unity was strong, political unity was strong in Africa, there was non-alignment. It emerged with all the countries of the South. So let's take a leaf from the past. Let's do a Sankofa, as we say in Ghana. Let's go back and pick it up and move. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you. So if there are no other questions, I would like to say on behalf of all the audience that we were really fascinated by your presentation, your vision, and also the steps that you are taking, not only at the level of your own country, but at the level of the Global South, as you said, which is absolutely important in the new geopolitics arising in the world in our year 2024. Thank you so much for your presence, and thank you so much for your contribution.
Thank you for having me. And I wish I'm going to start reading Arabic seriously.
لا تتكلمي عربي.
بتكلم عربي، لا بس عايزة عشان أقدر بتكلم
باللغة الفصحى.
باللغة
شكرا.
بالطلاقة
شكرا جزيلا
يعني.
للسيدة سامية نكروما.
Thank you.